When did you know you wanted to go into the police force?
From a very young age. There's a good photo, I don't know if it's dress up at kindy or, grade 1 or 2 or something, and I'm sort of standing there proudly, and I don't know where Mum procured the uniform from, but I was there, and I'd also whilst I sort of, I started enrolled in a business degree, and I could never see myself really working in a 9-to-5 office job, and so the police, for me, it was sort of there was part adventure, but part interest in that we were always sort of brought up with a sense of community and giving back.
When you were a uniformed, young policeman, how do you not take home some of the stuff you see? Because, yes, you'd see the best of people, but you'd also see the worst.
You do, and you see, particularly with domestic violence, the same sort of episode being repeated each shift, and the same devastation and the same cul-de-sac that people are stuck in where financially they can't afford to leave a relationship. I was up in Alice Springs just recently and talking to the police up there who are dealing, across a shift with 30 domestic violence incidents, and they're just going from one job to the next, and that, I think that becomes, very debilitating and disheartening very quickly, because in many of the cases there's not a good outcome.
Coping with all of this and obviously coping with the slings and arrows of politics, I've got to ask you before we leave this sort of early years, do you still have mates from school? Do you still have old mates in your life?
Yeah, I do. I've got a group of, there's about 7 of us, and we've stayed, friends from high school. I've got one mate from primary school, and we've
because I think it's a measure of someone that they've got old mates in their life.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we've just been loyal and together for, as I say, we finished school 1987, so it's a long time ago. You
ended up, as I said, as a detective. You worked in a number of areas, but principally the sex crimes squad. How did that influence your time in the Parliament?
I worked for a long time in the drug squad and the National Crime Authority and the Covert and Surveillance Unit, so I worked across a number of different squads. But yeah, I mean, in the area of sex offenders, particularly where you've got young girls or children, or women who are victims of crime in that space, I think that has to have an impact on you, taking statements, visiting crime scenes, prosecuting matters, dealing with offenders, and it became, I think, from that time, and probably even before that in uniform, a real passion in terms of protection of women and children. And I think it's a fundamental part of a civilised society that we take care of people who are most vulnerable.
I know you've also stood really closely with the Morcombes, the mum and dad of Daniel Morcombe, of course, who was abducted and murdered so horrifically, and argue that we need a national register of child sex offenders. If you were PM, would you bring that in?
Yes, yeah, very much so. And I think it's important. We tried to push it when we were in government. The states largely weren't interested. But I think we do justice to some of those victims, including Daniel, if we can provide more information, not less, to communities about where the risk is in their community and the precautions that parents need to take.